The news that net migration to the UK has reached record levels, rising to 330,000 in the year to March. The Immigration Minister, James Brokenshire, has said the new figures are deeply disappointing. Well, we can get reaction now from the UKIP leader, Nigel Farage, who's in our Westminster studio. Very good morning to you. Mr Farage, thanks for taking the time to talk to us. Many aspects to this issue to talk about today. The drivers for that increase in net migration almost equally split between EU and non-EU migrants. Part of that Britain can't do anything about, part of it can. Do we need new ideas?
Yeah, we do. What we need to have is an Australian-style point system where we don't discriminate against people from outside the EU in favour of unconditional free movement to those inside the EU. And we need to draw the terms of who we want much more clearly. I mean, you know, if we have a skills shortage within the UK economy, then fine, let's have people coming into Britain. At the moment, we simply don't do that. And what we're seeing, of course, and the reason that the numbers coming from the EU are now very much bigger than the numbers coming from the rest of the world, is we've admitted countries like Bulgaria and Romania into a political union with us. Now, you know, I said 2 years ago this would lead to a very large number of people coming into the country. I was laughed at, but I'm afraid it's proved to be true. Because look, the minimum wage in Britain is 9 times higher than the minimum wage in Romania. So these are the main drivers.
The figures for people coming in from the EU actually slightly lower than non-EU migrants, but only just. I mean, would you agree with the Institute of Directors, though, when it says that this drive by the government to bring down the net migration figure is damaging business because the people with the right skills aren't getting through?
Well, there is a partial truth in that. Because an engineer from India or a doctor from New Zealand now finds it quite tough to get to Britain, whereas unlimited numbers of unskilled labour from southern and eastern Europe can just freely come. So there is something in that. But look, here's the problem. You know, the Institute of Directors represents business. He wants his firms to employ people on the cheapest possible labour, and he couldn't give a damn about the fact that we've a chronic shortage of primary school places, that our National Health Service cannot cope with a population rising as rapidly as this, and that we have to build a new home every 7 minutes in Britain just to cope with the increase in population caused by immigration. So I accept that big business wants unlimited labour, but the other side of that is the change to our communities, the pressure on our public services, and the extent to which the wages of ordinary British people have been compressed. And I honestly believe that if we had an immigration system where we could control the quantity and quality of who comes to Britain, your programme would not need to discuss immigration ever again, because we'd all feel fairly happy with it.
A short while ago, though, your colleague Stephen Wolfe was talking about the idea of zero immigration for low-skilled workers for 5 years to bring about a rebalancing, but that's still not going to address the issue of people coming from within the EU who are low-skilled, is it?
We have a big opportunity as far as the EU debate is concerned. The government and the previous government have always denied the truth. They've always said we do have control over who comes to Britain from Europe, when of course the truth is that we don't. However, if the Prime Minister is going through a renegotiation of Britain's membership of the European Union, if he's going to convince us to vote yes, then what he needs to do is to change his tack and to put free movement of people and our ability to control our borders at the centrepiece of that renegotiation.
Looking at that wider issue of the migrant crisis that we're seeing unfolding across Europe now, and of course we can't conflate those scenes directly with these latest figures on net migration into Britain, but do you hold any hope of this conference in Vienna, this summit in Vienna, coming up with any useful ideas when there is already such a flow of people into Greece, into Hungary, people who are trying to move northwards into Northern Europe, indeed into the UK?
Yeah, and I spoke on this in April, you know, face to face with Mr. Juncker, the President of the European Commission, in April. What the EU have done is they've implemented a common asylum policy. The difficulty with it is that the terms of who qualifies for asylum are set so broadly that, frankly, it extends to countless millions. And we're beginning to see a sort of biblical exodus of people crossing the Mediterranean, knowing that they will all be accepted when they get to Italy or get to Greece. And so we've now got this massive debate going on about burden sharing within the European Union, because under Schengen, most of those people go straight to Germany, and Chancellor Merkel is under pressure. I think the EU have got this fundamentally wrong. I think the terms of their asylum policy are set too wide. They even include people who come from poor countries. Well, frankly, that's almost the whole of Africa.
So you're saying that there's got to be a toughening up of asylum policy. That's more realistic, do you think, rather than expecting individual EU countries to all accept their fair share of people?
Well, the problem with burden sharing is that the politics in the north of Europe is changing very quickly. I mean, in Sweden, the Swedish Democrats are now the lead party in the opinion polls, and they have a very strict view on numbers that should be admitted to Sweden. We've seen a Conservative party with tough immigration views come second in the general election in Denmark. Much the same is happening in the Netherlands and certainly in France. You know, no one can deny how strong the Front National under Marine Le Pen are. So the north of Europe politically find it pretty much impossible, their governments, to accept burden sharing. My argument, though, is more fundamental. I think the EU's common asylum policy is flawed. It never foresaw the events in North Africa and the Middle East, and what they need to do is to look at the example of the Australians, who in 2008 faced very much the same crisis, with boats of people coming to Australia, boats capsizing, people drowning, all the same things that we've seen over the course of 2015. And the Australians just said, look, you will not get into Australia if you come via this route. They were absolutely clear about it, and the boats stopped coming.
OK, Nigel Farage, thank you very much.